Late one night, you're walking home after a late shift at the local power plant. You pass what seems like the same repetitive gray building multiple times looking for yours. After a bit of walking, you make it home. Before heading in, you check your watch. 1:23 a.m. Your shift was supposed to end at midnight. Frustrated, you start towards the door. Pripyat, Ukraine. Founded on February 4th, 1970, Pripyat was a lively place. With a population of 49,000 people, families could go to the movies, go shopping, and maybe go for a swim in the Pripyat River. Built with the sole purpose of housing the workers and families of the local power plant, it wasn't a bad place to live. And with the new amusement park set to open soon, life here seemed like it couldn't get much better. On April 26, 1986, at approximately 1:23:45 a.m., Reactor 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. According to the World Nuclear Association, the explosion caused the largest uncontrolled radioactive release into the environment ever recorded for any civilian operation. However, no one knew this at the time of the explosion. The reactor crew, still dazed, attempted to assess the situation. They began to flow water into the reactor core. However, these attempts were later found to be unsuccessful, as at this point, there was no core. Around 5 minutes after the accident, at 1:28 a.m., firefighters were called to extinguish the flames in what was left of the Reactor 4 building. At 5 a.m., all exterior flames were extinguished. However, the core was still burning, and the radiation was seeping into the atmosphere. A couple days later, on April 28th, measures to contain the radiation and burning core began. A total of 5,000 tons of boron carbide, lead, sand, clay, and dolomite were flown in and dumped on the exposed core via helicopter as an attempt to control the still burning reactor. Yet, due to the amount of radiation in the air, pilots could not hover over the reactor and drop the materials, so they had to do it while moving. This proved to cause more harm than good, damaging standing structures. It was later found that most of these materials were not actually dropped on the reactor and that they may have acted as thermal insulators, increasing the temperature of the already insanely hot reactor. Due to this, there were many fears that the increased temperature could cause the core to melt through the base of the reactor building, contaminating the groundwater. Nonetheless, by May 5th, a system to flow cold nitrogen into the reactor area was constructed to cool the core. In about a day, the temperature had fell, resulting in a massive reduction in the amount of radiation being released. As mentioned before, there were fears that the core could eventually contaminate the groundwater. To counteract this, a tunnel was dug underneath Reactor 3 and was completed in 15 days. This allowed for the installation of an enormous reinforced concrete slab with a built-in cooling system just below Reactor 4. These efforts prevented the accident from becoming exponentially worse, as if left unattended, the radioactive fallout could have spread to most of Europe and possibly other parts of the world. However, a great deal of damage was already done. The elephant's foot, as it's been nicknamed, is a large mass made up of corium and other materials located in the basement underneath Reactor 4. Since the explosion in 1986, it has been left untouched and is still radioactive to this day. All 49,000 residents of Pripyat were evacuated just over a day after the accident, and much like the elephant's foot, it is left abandoned due to radiation. Playgrounds, Ferris wheels, and apartments have been left to rot. Pripyat and the surrounding area, now known as the Chernobyl exclusion zone, is now a wasteland taken over by Mother Nature. The exclusion zone isn't expected to be fully habitable for thousands of years, all due to a single explosion almost 40 years ago. The 1986 Chernobyl explosion remains one of the worst disasters in human history. But how does something like this happen? While many factors contributed, one stands out: lack of communication. The Soviet Union was very well known for its obsession of secrecy, and when it came to their nuclear power plants, it was no different. A day before the explosion, on April 25th, the reactor crew began preparing for a test to see how long the turbines would supply power to the reactor after being shut off. This was to determine if there would be enough time in the event of a power outage for the emergency power supply to activate. Certain automatic shutdown systems were disabled prior to the test, leaving the reactor in an extremely unstable condition. The condition of the reactor was not communicated properly to the crew conducting the test, so they were unaware of certain dangers. In the early morning hours on April 26th, the test began. Due to the condition of the reactor, its power level began to rise uncontrollably. Naturally, the crew pressed the emergency shutoff button, which inserts the control rods all the way into the core. These control rods are made of boron, and when they're inserted fully into the core, they completely kill the nuclear reaction. However, there was one major issue. The specific model of reactor at Chernobyl, the RBMK reactor, had a major design flaw. Its control rods, while mostly being made of boron, which slows reactivity, had tips made from graphite, which increases reactivity. So, for a brief moment when inserting the control rods, instead of slowing the reaction, they skyrocketed it. The final reading of Reactor 4 just before the explosion was 30,000 megawatts, 10 times what it was designed to operate at. This design flaw was completely unknown to the reactor crew that night. The Soviet Union kept it a secret and attempted to cover it up. This specific detail is what led to Chernobyl being the beginning of the end for the Soviet Union. Secrecy and lies are what caused Chernobyl, as communication could have easily prevented it. Because of this secrecy, many brave individuals, such as the firefighters and the plant workers, died that night and in the coming weeks after the explosion. Oh, and the reason for that fatal design flaw? It was cheaper.